Knowledge is power.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Power is power.
Most people think Cersei Lannister lost the Iron Throne because of Daenerys and her dragons. Some blame the High Sparrow. Some blame Joffrey being a monster of a king. But if you actually trace every single thing that went wrong for the Lannisters, you keep arriving at the same starting point. One scene. Season 2, Episode 1. A corridor in the Red Keep. 30 seconds. And a mistake that Cersei would spend the rest of her life paying for without ever realizing she made it. She did not lose an army that day. She did not sign a bad treaty. She just humiliated the wrong man. And that man spent the next several seasons quietly burning her entire world to the ground. This is the story of how Cersei's biggest mistake was not a battle she lost. It was a conversation she thought she won. Let's go back to the start of Season 2. King Robert is dead. Ned Stark has been executed. Joffrey is on the Iron Throne. The Lannisters are technically in control of King's Landing, but the cracks are already showing. Robb Stark is winning every battle in the north. Stannis Baratheon has a legitimate claim and a fleet. Renly has an army. And on top of all that, Arya Stark has slipped out of King's Landing without anyone catching her, which is a serious problem because the Starks were Cersei's hostages and she just lost one. So Cersei calls for Littlefinger. She wants him to find Arya. Simple request. He is the master of coin, a man with spies and contacts everywhere, and he has been useful to the Lannisters before. This is exactly the kind of task he was made for. But Littlefinger cannot help himself. Instead of just agreeing and walking away, he gets slippery. He suggests Cersei ask Varys instead. She pushes back. The conversation drifts, and suddenly Littlefinger is hinting that he knows about Cersei and Jaime. Not directly. He never does anything directly. He says, when boys and girls live in the same home, awkward situations can arise. Sometimes I've heard, even brothers and sisters develop certain affections, and when those affections become common knowledge, well, that is an awkward situation indeed. He smiles and says, knowledge is power. And this is where Cersei makes the mistake that changes everything. She tells her guards to seize him. Then she tells them to cut his throat. A blade goes to Littlefinger's neck. Then she says, stop! Wait! I've changed my mind! Let him go! She makes him step back 3 paces, turn around, close his eyes. She walks up close and says very quietly, power is power. And she walks away genuinely believing she just taught him a lesson. She did not teach him anything. She handed him a reason to destroy her. To understand why that moment was so damaging, you need to understand who Petyr Baelish actually is, because the show does not always make this as clear as the books do. Littlefinger was not born into anything. His family were minor lords of a tiny, forgettable stretch of coastline called the Fingers in the Vale. His father had a friendship with Hoster Tully, the Lord of Riverrun, and that friendship got young Petyr fostered at Riverrun alongside the Tully children, Catelyn, Lysa, and Edmure. Edmure was the one who gave him the nickname Littlefinger, mocking both his small stature and the insignificant land his family came from. He grew up in that house as a nobody, the ward of a great family, not a member of it. He fell obsessively in love with Catelyn Tully, who did not love him back. When Catelyn was betrothed to Brandon Stark, Ned's older brother, young Petyr challenged Brandon to a duel for her hand, because that is what a desperate teenager with no political sense does. Brandon Stark nearly killed him. He was sent home to his Fingers with a scar across his chest and a very clear message from the world. It does not matter how clever you are if you do not have the right name. He had one goal after that, and it was not revenge in any dramatic, obvious sense. It was to get to a position where nobody could ever dismiss him again, where no one could put him in that box because of where he came from. He used money and information to build himself up from nothing. He became master of coin of the Seven Kingdoms. He ran the most profitable network of brothels in King's Landing, which gave him leverage over half the powerful men in the city. He controlled the City Watch before Tyrion replaced him. In almost every practical sense, he was one of the people who kept King's Landing functioning. And the one rule a man like that lives by is this: never become a visible target. Never let the person in charge look at you and see a threat. The moment that happens, you lose your greatest weapon, which is that nobody is watching you carefully enough. Cersei blew through that rule in that corridor and shattered it. She made it explicit. She held a blade to his neck and told him without any ambiguity that she could end him whenever she felt like it. She stripped away the pretense that he was a valued servant and showed him exactly what she thought of him, a disposable instrument that could be discarded the moment he stopped being useful, and then she let him walk away. That was the fatal part, not the threat, the letting him walk away after the threat. Because what she communicated without words was this: a Lannister victory means you are always one bad day away from that blade coming back. The only safe future for Petyr Baelish is a world where the Lannisters do not win. Now here is what people miss, because everything that followed happened slowly and a lot of it happened off screen. Littlefinger did not storm off and immediately start plotting revenge. That is not how he operates. He went right back to being useful. He helped broker the alliance between House Tyrell and the Lannisters, which saved King's Landing from Stannis Baratheon's fleet at the Battle of the Blackwater. That alliance is the reason the Lannisters survived Season 2 at all. But while he was building that alliance, he was also laying the groundwork for what came next. He sat down with Lady Olenna Tyrell and, at some point during those conversations, made sure she understood what Joffrey truly was. He was careful about it, the way he always is. He praised Joffrey to Olenna's face, smiled the whole time, and let his men quietly spread the real story among the Tyrell servants. The truth about Sansa Stark, the beatings, the public humiliations, the crossbow incident in the throne room. Olenna Tyrell did not need things explained to her twice. She could already see with her own eyes who Joffrey was. She had watched how he treated Sansa in court, and she understood the specific danger this created, because her grandson Loras was now on the Kingsguard and would be in the room every single day. If Joffrey ever put his hands on Marjorie the way he had put them on Sansa, Loras would kill him on the spot, which would end the Tyrells just as surely as it ended Joffrey. So Olenna and Littlefinger agreed. Joffrey had to die before the marriage destroyed the Tyrells. The plan they built was almost elegant in its simplicity. Littlefinger obtained a rare poison called the Strangler. In the books, the Strangler was crystallized and hidden inside the amethysts of a decorative hairnet that Sansa was given to wear to the wedding. In the show, the same poison was concealed inside one of the stones of a necklace. Either way, Sansa was the delivery mechanism, completely unaware of what she was carrying. At the wedding feast, while Joffrey was making a spectacle of himself and humiliating Tyrion in front of the entire court, Olenna quietly approached Sansa, adjusted her hairnet and palmed one of the poisoned stones. She then dropped it into Joffrey's wine cup while no one was watching her. That is the whole mechanism. A few seconds, in full view of hundreds of people, and nobody saw a thing. Joffrey drank from the cup, began to choke violently, and died in Cersei's arms while the entire court stood around in shock and confusion. His last act was to raise his hand and point his finger at Tyrion, who was holding the empty wine cup. That dying accusation was not an accident. Littlefinger had engineered it. The entertainment at the Purple Wedding, the dwarf performers reenacting the War of the Five Kings and mocking the Starks and Joffrey's dead uncles in front of everyone, that was Littlefinger's doing. He arranged it specifically because he knew what would happen. He knew Joffrey would not be able to resist using it to taunt Tyrion. He knew Tyrion would not be able to stay quiet. He knew that once Joffrey poured wine over his uncle and made him serve as his cupbearer, Tyrion would be the person every eye in the room was on the moment the king started to choke. This was not a last-minute addition. The entire performance was designed to plant the accusation before the murder even happened. Littlefinger needed someone credible enough that Cersei would focus all her rage on them and stop asking questions. And Tyrion, who she had always despised, who was literally holding the wine cup when Joffrey collapsed, was perfect. The consequences cascaded exactly as planned. Tyrion was arrested. Cersei accused her own brother of murdering her son. The Lannister family, which had always had cracks running through it, split wide open. Tywin put Tyrion on trial. Tyrion, cornered and furious, demanded trial by combat. His champion lost. He was sentenced to death. He escaped by killing Tywin Lannister and fled Westeros entirely. In a single operation, Littlefinger had removed Joffrey from the board, fractured the Lannister family from within, caused the death of Tywin Lannister, the one man capable of holding the whole structure together, and walked out of it untouched. Cersei spent multiple seasons after the Purple Wedding convinced that Tyrion killed her son. She never once turned her eyes toward Littlefinger. While Cersei was screaming about Tyrion, Littlefinger had already done something else. He took Sansa Stark. At this point in the story, Sansa Stark was the last publicly confirmed living heir of House Stark. Robb was dead at the Red Wedding. Arya had vanished. Bran and Rickon were believed to be dead. Whoever held Sansa held a claim to the north, and the potential loyalty of every northern house still attached to the Stark name. That was a piece Cersei had been holding for over a year. He took Sansa to the Vale, married Lysa Arryn, and installed himself as Lord Protector. He now had the most defensible castle in the country, an army that had not fought in any of the wars, and the last known Stark heir. From a mountain fortress thousands of miles away, the man Cersei had held a blade to in a corridor now had more strategic pieces on the board than she did. There is a speech Littlefinger gives Varys in Season 3, Episode 6 that most people quote without fully registering what it means. Varys says that if you abandon order, all you have left is chaos, a pit that swallows everyone. Littlefinger says no. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail and never get to try again. The fall breaks them, and some are given a chance to climb. They refuse, they cling to the realm, or the gods, or love. Illusions. Only the ladder is real, the climb is all there is. People remember that as a cool villain monologue. What it actually is a confession. It is Littlefinger telling Varys and the audience exactly what he's been doing since Season 2. He builds disorder, he steps over it. He climbs. He did not start from power. He started as the rejected ward in someone else's house, in love with a girl who saw him as a little brother, holding a piece of land so small that people use the name of it to mock him. The only way a man like that gets to where Baelish reached is if the people above him keep falling. And the most reliable way to make powerful people fall is to make sure the ground under their feet is never stable. Cersei handed him the motivation to make her ground unstable when she put that blade to his neck. Every move he made after that scene was shaped by one simple truth. If the Lannisters won, he would eventually end up back in that position. And next time, she might not feel like stopping it. In the books, Tyrion specifically warns the Lannister Council about Baelish. He says, "I fear a trap. Littlefinger is subtle and ambitious. I do not trust him, nor should you." All of them ignored it. They kept using Littlefinger because he kept delivering results. They never stopped to ask what he was taking in return. What he was taking, slowly and without anyone noticing, was everything. But here is the thing. By the time Littlefinger died, his work was already done. Joffrey was dead, Tywin was dead, Tommen was dead. The Lannister dynasty was finished in every way that mattered. Cersei was sitting on a throne held together by wildfire and sheer stubbornness, with no real allies and enemies coming from every direction. The house that once had more gold, more soldiers, and more fear behind its name than any other in Westeros ended with no heirs, no legacy, and no one left to mourn it. And this is the part that actually matters, because this is not just a story about one fictional queen making one fictional mistake. Cersei believed that power was something you showed people. You demonstrated what you could do to them, and they fell in line. The problem with that is it only works on people who have more to lose than you do. The moment you demonstrate your power to someone who is already close to the bottom, and then walk away leaving them alive, you have not intimidated them. You have given them a reason. Petyr Baelish, after that corridor scene, had very little to lose. What he had was information, patience, and the absolute certainty that Cersei would never take him seriously as a threat. She held a blade to his throat and then went back to worrying about Robb Stark. She never connected a single thread back to him. He counted on that. The whole strategy depended on it. In the Game of Thrones, the most dangerous enemy is not the one threatening you from across a battlefield. It is the one sitting at your table, smiling, being useful, while quietly making sure that when the moment comes, there is nothing left for you to stand on. Cersei built that enemy herself, in a corridor, in 30 seconds. And she walked away smiling. If you want more of this, where we take one moment from the series and trace exactly what it set in motion, subscribe and drop a comment telling me which scene you think changed everything without anyone noticing. There are a few I have been sitting on, and some of them will genuinely change how you remember the show.